So my name is Malika Pryor, and I serve as the Senior Director of Education and Programs for the Detroit Historical Society. We're here to talk about representation, diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion in museums. Museums have a role to play in facilitating social justice, and by first accepting and ideally embracing the reality that museums are not neutral, that every position is in fact a position. And so when we embrace that idea that we have a responsibility to not just speak to, and in many instances not even to speak for, but really to simply include the reality of multiple experiences and to honor the truth of those multiple experiences, we're actually affecting a kind of social justice and change, because so much of what we see happening in the cultural zeitgeist, in museum movements generally, is the desire of communities that haven't been heard to simply hear their voice, to see their faces in the cultural institutions that are in their communities. Multiple perspectives matter. The United States isn't getting any less brown, it isn't getting any less complex, it isn't getting any less diverse. So in coming and stepping away from the notion of neutrality into one of full representation and inclusivity, one of the first steps that some institutions have already taken, and I'm proud to say that at Detroit Historical Society we've begun taking, is one, to include the community in the process of developing whatever it is that's happening, and then ultimately to fulfill the promise of the inclusion itself. And that's a process, there's a learning curve, but that decision to simply include and then act upon, those two things coming together, I think is a really important step. Some concrete ways in which we can see that reflected in DHS is the Detroit 67 project, which broke real ground not only in bringing in partner institutions, museums within the cultural center, but really engaging a full body, more than 100 strategic partners in a collaborative way, where those voices were literally within the exhibition and throughout the project being included, but also being centered. Another example that I think is really important, that I love to talk about as much as possible because I don't think we can talk about it enough, is our community gallery. For nearly 15 years, the Detroit Historical Museum specifically has offered up an incredible amount of square footage to community-based led narratives. So this is community organizations actually telling their own story, and the Detroit Historical Society's curatorial and exhibition team assisting and supporting those institutions and being able to do that, and often also offering up funding from our own budgets in order to see those projects come into fruition. One of my favorites since I've been here is our exhibition that featured the Southwest Detroit community, and it's just those are two I think really strong examples of how you can activate concretely, and how we've been able to do that at Detroit Historical. The road to true diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion is not a short one. As institutions, we haven't always done a great job of being representative, and that's why we hear this call to be things that we haven't always been. But it also can't be a crutch. And one of the things that I really appreciate about being a member of the Detroit Historical Society team is that we are pushing ourselves. We are asking ourselves tough questions. You don't have all of the answers or the totality of even an answer to a really big question right away, but the willingness to continue to do the work is so critically important. And I'm glad to be a part of a team that's doing the work.